Hi everyone, welcome to the TriEssence Martial Art channel, Fact or Fiction, Episode 2, Part 6 on the origin of Taichi. First of all, I'd like to, again, hope that everyone's still healthy and safe and staying away from crowded places. And hope that, your life aren't affected too much by the lockdown and the crisis going on around the world. And the first thing I'd like to address is that I received some comments referring to Chen Xin here, right? They were saying that Chen Xin is actually a well-known practitioner. He's either the founder of the small frame Chen style Taichi, or he's like, one of the person who taught small frame Taichi to the modern society. So obviously, we're not gonna take too much time in this. I was thinking of doing a separate episode on Chen Xin, but I'm probably not gonna waste time on that. The short version of it is that I should have stated that he's very unlikely to be a proper practitioner rather than he doesn't practice Tai Chi, right? So that's like a fault on my part. I should have clarified. The reason I didn't do that is because the video wasn't focused on Chen Xin, it was focusing more on Chen Wangting. So he was just a mean to bring out who first stated that Chen Wangting was the founder of Taichi. It was him and Gu Liusheng, I think. What's the name? Yeah. So that's the only reason why I brought him up. And I did say that according to Wu Tunan, right, that Chen Xin doesn't practice Tai Chi, but he wrote a book, etc., etc. Now, obviously, if you just read on Wiki or some other website that Chen Xin founded small frame Tai Chi, then what I'm going to say is don't believe everything you read. Not even in books, never mind the website. If you are like a practitioner of small frame Tai Chi, then there's nothing I can say to convince you, right? But it is my personal opinion that Chen Xin was not a real practitioner. He merely wrote a book. But of course, the fact that he wrote a book would mean that he doesn't know a form, right? Because the book did include a form. But that does not mean he's actually a qualified practitioner. Now, I have my own reasons for this. I'm gonna just briefly talk about it because, again, this isn't an episode about Chen Xin and I don't want to take too much time. But so first of all, whether he's a practitioner or not is pretty much the word of Wu Tunan versus the word of the people who are promoting him to be an important figure in the small frame Chen style Tai Chi of today, right? It's not even a matter of a word between Wu Tunan and himself, rather than people who's promoting his book and the form that is included in his book. So some people might think that because Chen Xin is a practitioner, so he has the most say, right? In his book, he did mention that he did study from his father. Although I would like to point out that in his book, he doesn't say he's actually very proficient at it. He says that he's seen his father and his elder brother, who specializes in the martial art training. He was more specialized in scholarly study, but because he'd been seeing them for a few decades, therefore he knows it. That could be interpreted as a humble way of self-introduction, but it also could just simply mean he's speaking the truth. We don't actually know that. And obviously, a lot of people would say that because his father was an important figure in Chen style martial art, therefore he must be a practitioner. Well, all I'm going to say about that is I know a lot of martial art masters whose son does not even practice. So just having a father that's a martial artist doesn't mean anything. And of course, I think his great-grand-uncle, right, was also, I think it's Chen Youben or something, I don't remember his name exactly, who was also quite an established practitioner around Chen Changxing Tan. Whether that's true or not is irrelevant because, like I said before, martial art does not get passed through genes or biochemistry, right? Just simply being an offspring of someone who was a martial artist doesn't make you a martial artist. So none of those are actually strong enough evidence that he is an established martial artist. What would have been good evidence is who have he defeated, what kind of reputation he's gained himself, and that is completely blank. Okay, as far as anyone knows and record goes, he has never fought anyone in his life, at least anyone that's not worthy. And furthermore, he hasn't actually taught any student until around 10 to 15 years before he passed away in his later life, right? Around 60, after the year 60s when he was starting to teach someone, and he probably only taught one student. maybe more, but there's only one that's kind of supposedly passed on the skill. So a lot of those things are quite sketchy. And of course, his student that is known today, I believe his name is ChenKezhong. He supposedly taught someone called Chen Boxiang, and they eventually passed down this martial art as small frame. The problem here is that there are no record of big frame or small frame differentiation in the Chen style record. When Yang Chan visited Chen Changxing, there was no differentiation between small frame, big frame. You can't even find it in their own books, right? In the Chen village's own books. And I did read Chen Xin's book, although it's quite some years ago. He did not talk about small frame, big frame either. It makes you wonder where this whole identification comes from. And if you look further, it come up much later on, right? Either in the 50s or the 60s, where Gu Liusheng was the first to start to differentiate of big frame, and then later on, I believe it's almost like in the 80s where small frame eventually became the thing. The problem with that is, okay, if you look at the history of the village, for example, the modern four warriors of Chen style, right? It's Chen Xiaowang, Chen Zhenglei, Zhu Tiancai, and Wang Xian. Okay, I personally don't like them, and I don't think they're great martial artists, but we're gonna get to that at the latest episode. We're gonna talk more about that. But so whether I like them or not, it doesn't matter, right? According to those people, as well as some others in the village, before Chen Zhaopei came back to the village in the 1950s, no one in the village trained Chen style, and no one knew about the Chen style martial arts. But if Chen Xin taught in the village, and he had at least one disciple called ChenKezhong, who did flee the village according to this version of the story, but he did come back before the 1950s. And why would Chen Xiaowan and all those other people say there's no one practicing Tai Chi in the village? Maybe they don't know, maybe they forgot, maybe they didn't see, but more likely is that either they didn't recognize him as a proper practitioner, or he was just not actually there. We don't actually know. And according to Chen Xiaowang and others' accounts, when Chen Xiaopei came back, no one was practicing. He was upset about that and decided to fix it, and that's why he started teaching Chen style. And all the young kids in the village started to learn from him, except one, I believe, was only one guy that we know of. There might be others, I'm not sure, but it was like Chen Boxiang and some others who supposedly started training under ChenKezhong. But this whole history was not mentioned by the other part of the Chen village, and it was not known by others either. It's a very suspicious claim. I'm not saying that Chen Boxiang never learned under ChenKezhong, but the fact that they only claim it at a much later time, where there was no account from other members of the village, makes it suspicious, right? And of course, in the 70s, the government wanted to promote Chen Xiaowang, and eventually he became the head of the village, and Chen style became a big commercial thing, and eventually became even more successful in the 80s and 90s, and up to now it is a multi-million-dollar industry, so to speak. So it is my suspicion that Chen Boxiang or whoever it was saw that, but they never got a piece of the pie. They're not even recognized, right? They weren't even mentioned by the government, and therefore they started the whole small frame branding to basically compete the market, because they can't compete against Chen Xiaowang in his own territory, right? In his own frame or the form. So he had to come up with a different name, a different identity, and a lot of his members ever since then has been promoting the idea that the small frame was a secret form. That's what no one else knows. It's been kept only in a certain family, and that's completely bogus, right? There's no record of the small frame being special or secretive. There was not even a record of small frame. And that's why I personally have a lot of hesitance and suspicion when it comes to the authenticity of small frame. I mean, no doubt Chen Boxiang and all these others who promote small frame got their form from Chen Xin's book, but I'm not actually sure how legit they actually studied from ChenKezhong, who then studied from Chen Xin. That part, I'm not saying it's not possible, but I have my personal doubts, right? Whether you believe it or not is up to you. But all of these are just suspicions and circumstantial, so they can't really prove anything. What for me was the nail in the coffin was actually reading Chen Xin's book. So I don't know if any of you have read it. I have, and it was, for me it was a giant waste of time, because his book talked mostly gibberish, right? He tried to tie in Zhou Yi, which is I Ching for you guys in the West, the trigram, Bagua, Wu Xing, the 5 elements, Yin Yang. He took a lot of these ancient Chinese philosophy and Taoist stuff series and took like Chinese medical stuff, qi, channel, circulation, and he cramped everything and tried to forcefully tie them into Chen style martial art, or the Chen style Taichi as he called it at the time. And a lot of it, for me, it's very apparent that it's a try-hard attempt to add content to a book that he actually has no real martial content to write about. And that to me suggests that he actually doesn't know or wasn't a real practitioner. Right? If you look at Chen Fake's teaching, if you look at Hong Junsheng's teaching, Feng Zhiqiang's teaching, it's all martial orientated, right? They have massive content on the martial aspect and training aspect, and very little, right? I know Chen Fake doesn't even talk about yin yang wu xing, ba gua, zhou yi, yi qing. He doesn't talk about that stuff. He was not highly educated enough to know about these series, right? Which is something that Chen Xin was good at. And that makes you think, do you actually need to know these things to be master of Chen style? Most likely not. Chen Changxin was also not known for his serious understanding of Chinese ancient philosophy. So none of those things are actually relevant to the martial art. But in Chen Xin's book, majority of his chapters is about tying these things into the martial art, rather than actually talking about the martial art on its own. And the part that does talk about the martial art are also often full of mistakes. For example, he talks about opening the shoulder, okay, which if you watch my video on the 4 fundamental principles of internal, you know that is one of the key practices of internal martial art. However, according to him, opening shoulder, you actually open a gap in your shoulder joint, which we now know that is biologically impossible, right? When martial artists talk about opening the shoulder, they're actually referring to something else. And should Chen Xin actually practice Tai Chi and got somewhere with it, he wouldn't make mistakes like that. He would know the shoulder itself can't open. It's something else that opens that we call it opening of shoulder. So there are a lot of mistakes like that when it comes to actual practical training of Tai Chi. And the rest are just all series that you can forcefully attach to Tai Chi, like you channel circulate this way or that way at this time or that time. But none of it is actually real content compared to the actual Chen style teaching you find from genuine established masters like Chen Fake, Hong Junsheng, Feng Zhiqiang, etc. And this is my main reason to believe that what Wu Tunan said was the truth, that he didn't actually practice Tai Chi, and he wanted to write a book. And obviously, when you write a book, you can't just say, oh well, I don't know Tai Chi, but I'll write a book. Therefore, he sort of curve-bordered by mentioning his father and his elder brother, and suggests that he also knows his stuff. But I believe at the most he probably seen them practice. He maybe followed them a few times, but that doesn't make him a practitioner, right? To be a proper practitioner, you have to follow the strict training schedule for either 3, 6, or 10 years, depending on the martial art, and you have to physically attain certain kind of ability, right? With opening of shoulder, opening of hips, opening of the spine, various joints. There has to be something that changes in your body before you are qualified to be a practitioner and be qualified to actually talk about the things in terms of your martial arts style. If you haven't physically attained that, it's only speculation. You only guess or regurgitate what your father or your master taught you. But if you haven't experienced it yourself, you can't describe it from a personal understanding, and therefore a lot of it becomes wrong. And that's evidence. That's quite evidential in Chen Xin's books. Alright, so that's all I'm gonna say about Chen Xin. I mean, if you do practice small frame, it's your own choice. I don't believe small frame was ever seen in the original history. It's more like a marketing scheme, and I don't think the modern small frame is even remotely decent compared to Chen Fake's teaching of the so-called big frame now. I don't like to use the term, but because it is small frame, so I'm gonna use big frame. So I don't see the same kind of internal understanding, mechanic, and everything. So I personally don't like small frame at all. But like I say, if you do practice that, it's your choice. If you're only reading that Chen Xin is a practitioner from Wiki and other websites, and don't believe everything you read. Okay, so this is all I'm gonna say regarding Chen Xin. Next, we're gonna move on to today's main topic, which is the last major claim that we're gonna cover in terms of the founding of Tai Chi. And I know there are other small claims here and there as well, but none of those actually makes an impact, right? I'm only going to cover the ones that are impactful in the understanding of the origin of Tai Chi. The last one that we're going to talk about is the Li family. Okay, now regarding the the Tang village and the Li family clan, there are many different theories to how that ties into Taichi. And basically, each individual sort of, once this village proclaims itself, various individuals try to tie their own belief around this new claim. For example, there are people who say Yang Luchan actually, after studying with Chen Changxing, he went to the Li village, Tang village, Li family to learn there. There are people who claim that Chen Wangting learned from there. There are people who claim that Jiang Fa originated from there. There are people who try to tie the village, the Tang village to Zhang Sanfeng. So there are many different claims. Today, we're gonna just focus on the main claim, right? The claim that the Tang village itself made. I can't remember the exact date they made it, but it's somewhere in the 2000. I believe 2003 is probably when this thing first became known. And then consequently, it just got bigger and bigger, and eventually, I think only in the past maybe 7 years or so, it actually gained more awareness, right? When they first made this claim, people didn't actually care. But don't quote me on the dates. I don't really remember. I'm not a historian, so I don't try to remember every single detail, especially dates and stuff. So according to the Tang village Li family's claim, the Taichi martial art is supposed to be invented by a guy called Li Daozi. Okay, so I'm gonna just write his name here. I hope you can still see. Yeah, unfortunately I can't do nothing about the light. Li Daozi, okay. So Li Daozi he's like a Taoist priest / Buddhist monk / Confucius guy from the Tang dynasty. The reason he has all three titles because he's one of the believers that all three of these schools of thought should be united into one. Okay, I don't agree with that, but that's not for today's video. So he supposedly was the so-called abbot of a temple called the Qianzai Temple, which is built around where the Tang village is to today. Right, there's like a temple built in the Tang dynasty, and this guy is supposed to be someone who knows everything. He knows like scholarly work, he knows academic stuff, he knows astrology, he knows yin yang, I Ching, future telling, religion, and supposedly he was also a well-versed martial artist. However, the historical record does not talk about what martial art he knows. Okay, and just to put things in perspective, according to the historical habit, right, anyone who can dance with a sword is considered well-versed in martial art. So just because a record says someone knows martial art doesn't actually mean they're good at fighting, right? It's the record are not very accurate in that sense. For example, the famous Tang dynasty poet Li Bai, right? He's recorded to carry a sword and he likes to dance with a sword. And therefore a lot of people believe that he's actually a sword master. But he actually never fought anyone in a duel. So, I'm not saying he's not, but the thing is he could very well just be someone who likes to do sword dancing, which may or may not be sword fighting. So when it comes to historical record, just simply when they say someone knows martial skill, it doesn't always mean fighting. And when it means, sometimes also means military, and military and hand-to-hand fighting also quite different. So it could mean a variety of things. Okay, so according to the Li family of Tang village, they basically discovered around the 2003, I would say, I can't remember exactly, they discovered a family ancestral record, and from that they basically see evidence that Li Daozi supposedly founded Taichi, and it was passed down through generation. Keep in mind this is Tang dynasty, right? That is like, you get Tang dynasty, you get Song dynasty, you get Yuan dynasty, Ming dynasty, and then Qing dynasty. So it's like 5 dynasties ago compared to Yang Luchan, which I would, I don't know the exact date, but I'll estimate to be at least 700 to 1,000 years before Yang Luchan's time. Right? So according to them, Li Daozi founded Taichi, and he passed it down generation after generation, up until the 8th generation of the Li family, right? So the temple was always there, but the Li family migrated there at a later stage. And after the Li family migrated to this Tang village, that's considered the 1st generation. The 8th generation Li family guy, which I think is called Li Mao Chun, right? I think that's his name. He went to the Tianzai temple and learned from the then abbot of the Tianzai temple. Because then during the ninth generation, there are two brothers from the Li family. One is called Li Zhong, one is called Li Xin. Okay, they're supposed to be friends with Chen Wangting. And all three of them then went to the Tianzai temple, and then they studied from the master at the time there. And then together, they founded the modern version of Taichi. And there's even a whole elaborate story about how they couldn't agree on certain terms, and therefore the master told them to go back and train for a year, then come back and have a duel, and whoever won would have the final say. And supposedly eventually Chen Wangting won, and then that's why the style was called Chen style Tai Chi. It's a very nice story, but obviously it's not very rational or logical. We'll get to that at a later stage. So basically, according to the Li family, that's how the Chen family got their martial art, and then it passed down then to the races, as we all know in history, how it got to Yang Luchan, etc., etc. So there's a couple of problems with this claim, right? First of all, based on what we can observe of martial arts as we know, no modern Chinese martial arts style, and modern I mean by Qing Dynasty standards, stuff that are still existing in today's society, right? The so-called traditional Chinese martial art. None of the ancestry can trace further back than late Ming Dynasty. That's because stuff like martial art change quite a bit, and they tend to not survive such a long years of lineage. If we look at modern example, right, Yang Luchan was only in the late Qing Dynasty. The founder of Xingyi, Li Luoneng as well, and Guo Yunshen, he died in the either 1900 or maybe 1908, depending on which record you go by. They're all relatively recent, but if you look at their disciples or their descendants to today, the martial art is very different from what it were in the late Qing Dynasty. And what this tells us is that martial art either dies out, loses essence, or it changes completely. What Yang Luchan did as Yang style is going to be very different from what people do as Yang style today in the parks or in the gym, etc. So for a style to pass down through, maybe I'll just say 700 years, give or take from Tang Dynasty, unalterated, or maybe it was alterated, but still kept the essence all the way through to the 8th generation Li Mao Chun of the Tang village Li family, is highly unlikely. Okay, not saying it's impossible, but based on what we can see from all the other styles, nothing ever traced back to that far, right? And a lot of martial actually dies out after 3 or 4 generations. It doesn't get passed down, through a couple hundred years. And of course, this is only a circumstantial argument, right? There are people who don't believe this, so we're not gonna just bank everything on this one point. This is just to point out the various irregularities. First is that there's like a massive long age lineage. This is the kind of thing that Chinese people like to believe in back in the days. But if you have actual knowledge on historical studies, you realize that's very unlikely to be the case. For example, General Qi Jiguang, right? He's late Ming Dynasty. At the time, he wrote down all the famous empty hand martial arts that civilians practiced at his time. And majority of those styles no longer exist in Qing Dynasty. That just shows you how much change it gives in the martial art world. And furthermore, before Qing Dynasty, hand-to-hand combat was not a big thing, right? Even in Ming Dynasty, where Qi Jiguang wrote about it, he said that hand-to-hand martial art is not very useful. That's because back in the days, especially Song Dynasty and above, often civilians have weapons as well. And when you have weapons, hand-to-hand combat is not important, which is why we believe that in the Song Dynasty and beyond, martial art will more focus on sword, saber or dao, right, stick, spear, and all of these things. Very little effort was put onto hand-to-hand combat. I mean, you could argue that maybe Li Daozi was actually proficient in weapon fighting as well, but what I'm saying is there's no need for people at that time to develop hand-to-hand fighting. Okay, and from the historical record of Tang Dynasty, there was also very little if any, record on hand-to-hand combat. So it doesn't make sense that Li Daozi of Tang Dynasty invented a hand-to-hand system called Taichi. Those of you who think but Taichi has weapon as well, if you actually did the style, you will see that its hand-to-hand combat is the main focus. Weapon is it's like a subsection of the hand-to-hand combat, right? It's not like the weapon is the main focus and hand-to-hand is the supporting training. It's not like that. And obviously, I don't even think the Taichi sword is actually very good in terms of combat. It's more like a placeholder that you can teach people, or rather, if you have the right structure internal training, then your weapon combat will be good. But the technique itself is quite subpar. But that's another discussion altogether. So Li Daozi could have made martial art and passed down in the Tang village, through a couple hundred years. But I don't think so, right? It's not very logical, and they don't have any solid evidence of this. Now the next thing, right? Another main point of their claim is that this Qianzai temple has a Wuji Dian. It's like a Wuji palace, okay? And they also have a Taichi Gong. Gong is also like a palace. Dian, Gong. I don't know the difference in English, but they both refer to palace. And they say and to them that is basically one of the reasons why they believe Li Daozi founded Taichi, because in the record they have of Li Daozi, they only say he was well versed in martial skill. It doesn't actually say it's Taichi. There's actually no word in the record that says Taichi Quan, right? The Taichi first, that is the martial art we are talking about. But they try to tie it into the fact that in the Qianzai temple they have Taichi Gong and they have like Wuji Dian. But the problem to that is Taichi and Wuji are common terms that are used in Taoist religion, right? So you can find various mentions of Taichi and Wuji, Taichi Gong and Wuji Gong all across China in all the Taoist temples. It's not unique to the Qianzai temple. So I don't believe that just the fact that they named the palace Taichi or Wuji is enough of a reason that that Taichi and Taichi martial art come from them. And the other thing is obviously that Chen Wangting most likely did know the Li brothers, right? Li Zhong and Li Xin. He most likely did know them. But if he learned martial art with them from an abbot of the Qianzai temple, I see no reason why he did not mention that to his own people when he taught it, right? You got to realize that back in the old days, and even today for the old school people, lineage is very, very important, right? If I learn from a master, I have the obligation to tell everyone who I learned from, right? If I learn from someone and I pretend I didn't learn from him, that's like a mortal sin in the Chinese martial art world, right? Back in the days, if a disciple does that, sometimes actually the disciple gets killed off by other members of the martial clan. It's one of the most serious sins you can commit. So if Chen Wangting learned from there, right, then he would have told his own people who he learned his martial art from. And that would not result in the Chen village saying that they don't know where their martial art came from, okay? I mean, some people do argue that maybe, this Qianzai temple abbot told him to keep it quiet. But, I think that's a very weak argument, because if the record of him being friends with those two Li brothers and he visited their village and suddenly came back with martial art, then everyone with half a brain would know who he learned it from. Keeping a secret doesn't make sense, right? And so I do believe that the lack of record from the Chen village kind of counters this claim. Another thing, like I've mentioned in my previous video, right, we see direct connection between the Chen martial art and the General Qi Jiguang's first classic. But this Li Daozi claim completely avoids the Qi Jiguang first classic, right? Doesn't mention it at all. It wasn't like Li Daozi taught to them and eventually somehow it passed to Qi Jiguang and then whatever the case, it does not involve Qi Jiguang at all. But we can clearly see the resemblance of the first classic of Qi Jiguang comparing to the Chen martial art. And the only reason why I believe the Li family did not mention this is because they actually aren't aware that there is striking similarity between the first classic and Chen style. And there's also kind of hints toward that they claim is fabricated because it doesn't fit the evidence we have at hand. But again, this alone is circumstantial. It's not enough to convince that they fabricated their claim, right? So we need to look further. Another thing that they claim is that because in the Li family record, it actually does not say Taichi Quan. These three words is absent from their record, okay? What they did claim that Qianzhai temple people, right, they founded this thing called Wuji Yangsheng Gong, right? Wuji is basically in the Chinese ancient philosophy, Wuji is like the state of the world before anything existed, right? It's just chaotic, like space. It's void. Wuji is like that. Taichi is basically a circle, right? Commonly people think Taichi is a yin-yang sign. That's actually not completely correct. Taichi refers to the actual circle and not the yin-yang, right? So Wuji is nothing, imagine blank. Taichi is a circle. The circle basically marks a condition where life can exist, right? Wuji is basically where there's nothing and there's like space, nothing can exist. Taichi is a circle, and within Taichi becomes Liang Yi, the two equivalent. That's where there's a line in the middle, right? When the chaotic energy separate between yin and yang. That actually, strictly speaking, is called Liang Yi and not Taichi. But most people get it confused, and therefore they see the yin-yang sign as Taichi, which is also fine, right? If you're not nitpicking. So that is the ancient Chinese philosophy. Wuji gave birth to Taichi, it's a circle, and Taichi gave birth to Liang Yi. Liang Yi gave birth to Si Xiang, then to Ba Gua, etc. So by claiming that they founded Wuji Yangsheng Gong, right? Wuji, they basically are suggesting that they are the mother of Taichi Quan. You see how smart they were, or sort of on their claim. They don't directly say they founded Taichi Quan. They say they founded Wuji Yangsheng Gong, which, according to the philosophy, is the mother of Taichi. And Yangsheng means nurturing one's health or practicing of longevity. So this comes from the idea that in recent era, people have been doing Taichi for longevity. However, the problem with their claim is that they weren't aware that Taichi was not seen as a longevity training in the Chen family, nor was it seen as that in the Yang family originally, right? Taichi was a martial art used for combat. The whole idea of Taichi is for longevity and nurturing one's life was only popular around Yang Chengfu's time and Wu Jianquan's time, right? And that's most likely when someone added the last line in the Taichi classic that says, Zhang Sanfeng says that Taichi is not for fighting, but to give all the heroes of the world a better way to live for longer. That only became a thing in the Republic era, right? Taichi, Yang Luchan did not teach anyone for health purpose. The Chen village in their record didn't talk about, training Taichi is good for health. It is a martial art. But to me, it's clear that whoever made this claim from the Li village was not aware of that, and they only took what we perceive as the Taichi's value system of the modern age, right? Since the late Republic to especially it got a resurgence around the early 50s, and we had the Cultural Revolution, and after Cultural Revolution, it resurged again, the whole idea of everyone needs to do Taichi for health. That is a very modern product. So by them claiming that Wuji Yangsheng Gong, right, the Wuji longevity practice, they think is smart to hint that they're the mother of Taichi. In actual fact, it kind of also shows that they lack of understanding to the original purpose of Taichi. And another obvious problem to this claim is that, well, if you look from this way, it sounds like, yeah, there's Wuji, and then later on, Chen Wangting learned from them, therefore found that Taichi is logical. However, it is actually not logical in practice, okay? For example, following that logic, if what they found is Wuji, and then Chen Wangting learned that, and therefore he must become Taichi because Wuji gave birth to Taichi, then why did Yang Luchan not name his style Liang Yi, two equivalent? Because that's the next thing in the sequence. Or if Yang Luchan learned it as Taichi, why don't Wu Quanyou, Wu Jianquan, Wu Yuxiang, these offspring call it Liang Yi? Or why don't Sun Lutang call it Liang Yi? It doesn't work like that. And if someone call it Liang Yi, then must the next guy call it Si Xiang, and then the next one call it Ba Gua. And I mean, does that mean Dong Haichuan fond of Bagua actually is a derivative of a development from the Li family as well? It doesn't make sense, right? When people name a martial art, they don't follow the ancient philosophy of world creation. Okay, so just because someone learned a Wuji Yang Zheng Gong, it does not mean they start going to be named Taichi. That's not the logic that we can observe from all the martial arts we know today, right? Naming martial art are quite random, but they never follow a pattern like this. So the very fact that they try to position themselves as Wuji, as a mother of Taichi, actually in turn proves that they are fabricating evidence, because that's not how the naming system of martial art works. But again, this alone is still circumstantial. I'm just covering all these things so you know how many irregularities there are within their claim. Alright, another thing that they claim is that from the 8th generation, Li Maochun, and even further on, right, like they've all been teaching in at least 5 different provinces outside of the village. That is another claim that they made. However, if we again observe history, Taiji was never found anywhere else until Yang Wuchan went to Chen village. So if the Li family, the generation before Chen Wangting went there, has been teaching in 5 different provinces, why don't we see any evidence of any of these branches today? Of course, like I said earlier, martial arts tend not to survive through hundreds of years, right? But they should at least, if there are 5 provinces and a lot of disciples, they should at least be records, but there are no record of such. So that's another irregularity, is that we don't find any trace of Taiji outside what we know in history, but that's not what the family claim. So basically this will conclude the irregularity that I found in their own family claim. Next, we are going to look at actual problems in the so-called ancestral manuscript, okay? Because everything I've said up to now can be circumstantial, it's not definitive evidence. But if you actually study the actual family manuscript, which by the way, they claim it came from the Ming Dynasty, but they have refused for people to do carbon dating, right? They claim that the ancestry record is very precious and they do not allow outsiders to possess it, even if it's for a couple of days, to do carbon dating. So they're pretty protective on the record, and that will be the easiest way to clarify any doubt. If that record does come from the Ming Dynasty, then most likely they claim it is true, and if not, then there are problems. Okay, and do keep in mind that fabricating manuscript and ancestral record is not new, right? The same behavior and practice can be observed countlessly throughout Chinese history, and especially in the martial art world. So, and even in the West, right? I don't remember the exact detail. I read this a couple of years ago, but there was somebody in France, I think, in the 1600s or 1700s. I don't really know. I mean, if you're interested, you can look it up yourself. There was someone there who fabricated the entire record that pointed him to be the leader of Illuminati or Freemason, one of the secret society, and he basically coaxed a lot of upper class French people to pay him money to join this secret society. He even made a fake record and paid someone to put into the National Library that proved that he is the current leader. So people, when they check the record, they find him. Eventually he was exposed, but the point is things like this happen all around the world, right? It's not new. Up to now, I'm not saying they fabricated the record, but just keep in mind that it is highly possible. It's not something that is unheard of or unseen. Okay, so unfortunately now the technical parts are heavily oriented on the understanding of Chinese language. So those of you who don't speak Chinese, it's going to be harder for you to understand. But I'm going to try my best to explain so that it makes sense. So the first issue with the actual manuscript, right, is that you take the Li family's manuscript and you compare it to the Li Yiyu's script, and you compare it to the Yang Chengfu's script. Basically, you will see that the name of the martial art, the name of the move in the Taiji form, doesn't add up. Okay, so the first irregularity that I'm going to talk about is the move Shan Tong Bei. Okay, I don't really know how they translate into English, But let's just, if you don't know Taichi, just assume there's a move in all the variations of Taichi, including Chen style, the forefathers of Taichi, called Shan Tong Bei. Now, according to the Li Yiyu's text, and the text that he gave to Hao Weizhen, it is called Shan Tong Bei, right? So this character, it means mountain. In the 1934 edition of Yang Chengfu's Taichi book, it's written as Shan Tong Bei, which looks like this. Shan in Chinese means fan, right? This means mountain. They have the same sound. This again is something that happens a lot in Chinese martial art, because back in the days, when the master teaches student, he talks. So you hear, Shan Tong Bei. But you are not sure which character he actually refers to. And this is why that the character actually often changes from generation to generation. According to the Li family's manuscript, they also use the word shan for fan, okay, which is not the word used originally, which is shan. And furthermore, if you look at the edition of Yang Chengfu's, manuscript that he published, the book he published on his manuscript, in 1931, 3 years before the final edition, he also used Shan Tong Bei, right? So in 1931, Yang Chengfu used Shan mountain, and in 1934 he changed it to Shan, which is fan. And somehow the Li family used the latest edition of the word rather than the previous one. Okay, this would suggest that whoever wrote that manuscript had copies of the latest text of 1934 and was unaware of the alteration from an earlier version. Another example of this is Ban Lan Cui, right? It's basically in Chen style you call it Yan Zhou Hong Cui, where you have hand here and do a punch. In Yang style, it's basically when your hand goes this way and you do a punch. It's basically the first straight punch you find in any of the Taichi forms. So in the original text of the Chen family of Li Yiyu, or of the Chen family is called Yan Zhou Hong Cui, right? But from Li Yiyu to the early text, and again to Yang Chengfu's 1931 text, it's called Ban Lan Cui. Okay, basically, it's a word. Let me just erase this. That looks like this. Okay, Ban Lan Cui. But in his 1934 edition, he used the word Ban Lan Cui. Lan means to block or to intercept. Okay. And again, the Li family used the later version of the movement rather than the earlier one. Right? So you can see that there's a pattern here. And the same can be observed on moves such as Dao Nian Hou, right? The repulse monkey, that's the English translation. And I'm not going to go through all the examples, but you can see there are quite a few examples where the Li text have the same character as the 1934 edition of Yang Chengfu's book, but it does not correlate to any of the earlier versions, right? Whether it's Yang Chengfu, Li Yiyu, or Hao Weizhen, or any other copies that people can get a hand on to study. So this is one very solid example to show that their manuscript could not have come from Ming Dynasty. It could not even have come from Qing Dynasty. It must have been made during the Republic era after Yang Chengfu had published his book, unless they really are expert of clairvoyance, right? They can actually predict the future, right? Which I'm joking, basically, that's not possible. So this is the first example or evidence that they fabricated the manuscript. Okay, next, within the manuscript, there's a portion called Shenfa, which is called bodywork, right? If you translate it into English. It basically includes what we know today as the 10 principles of Taichi. Basically, it's Han Xiong, Ba Bei, Guo Dang, Hu Tun, right? So, for those who don't speak Chinese, basically refers to hardening of the chest, rounding or bulging of the back, rounding of the crouch area, protecting of the butt area. I'm not gonna explain what it actually means, right? This is not a practical video, but just know that there's basically a set of requirements of body requirement on the body, right? So that's why it's called Shenfa, body work, or you can say Shenfa as in the body principle. So this can be found in Li Yiyu's old 3 volume. Okay, and obviously, it was also found in the Li family's manuscript. However, within Li family's manuscript, there is two additional texts. One is called Tang nuo, one is called Shan zhan. Tang nuo basically refers to evasion. Shan zhan should refer to evasion. Tang nuo refers to moving fast or jumping. It's arguable what it actually refers to, but those two are agility qualities, Tang nuo and Shan zhan. These two are found in Li Yu's manuscript. However, it was only found in Li Yu's manuscript that he gave Hao Weizhen. So basically, Li Yu first, compiled his all three volumes at the earliest stage of his life, and then back then there's no photocopy machine, right? So he had to copy his own text and give to other people. So the version of the text that has Shan zhan and Tang nuo, these two qualities, on the heading of the text, it actually says it was given as a gift to Hao Weizhen from Li Yu, which happened at the later stage of his life. But people also have copies of his earlier version of the three old volumes, and he does not have Shan zhan and Tang nuo. Instead, he has Song Jian Zhui Zhou, right, resting on the shoulder and sinking off the elbow. We do not know why Shan zhan and Tang nuo was added to the Hao Weizhen version of the text. But what we do know is that those two, Shan zhan and Tang nuo, was not in the original Li Yu's text, only he added at a later stage. So if the Li family text again predate everyone else, how is it that they can predict ahead of time that two of these qualities would appear later on in Li Yu's text but not the early text, right? That also does not make sense. Now some of you might say, maybe Li Yu later on discovered the hidden Li family text and therefore realized he made a mistake and added those two in. If you're really like a fanboy, you can sort of, convince yourself this is the case. However, if we look at the Yang family's manuscript, again, there are the 10 principles, right? And then it does not include Shan zhan and Tang nuo. So we are pretty certain that Shan zhan and Tang nuo was basically a product from Li Yu's own understanding that he added on in later point of his life. Because his text and Yang's text originally is pretty much the same version, right? This only came later on. And if Li Yu really did, somehow managed to get hold of a secretive Li family text, he probably would have, shared it with the Yang family given the close relationship at that time. I know the two lineage kind of drift apart later on, but during Li Yu's time, they were still kind of close, so he wouldn't have held this secretly, especially there's nothing, groundbreaking, just two separate terms that refers to the speed of body motion, rather than the body principle, so to speak. So this is the second problem with the Li's text that kind of suggests that it was copying stuff from a later state rather than the original. So you don't have access to the original text to know the difference. Okay, so next, as I said earlier, that the Li family does not actually say Taichi Quan, right? Taichi first. It does not have that. However, it has Wuji Yangsheng Gong, which I believe is basically whoever fabricated the thing stood up as a convenient way to hint that they are the mother of Taichi by making Wuji longevity practice. So naturally they have a whole text talking about the Wuji longevity practice. And interestingly enough, this paragraph that they have for Wuji Yangsheng Gong, right, Wuji longevity practice, is almost word for word the same text that Sun Lutang wrote in his book about the Wuji quality of Xin Yi. Not even Tai Chi, but of Xin Yi. If you can read Chinese, you compare the two, they almost word for word, right? The only difference is that some places the comma were put in the wrong place, which actually shows that whoever fabricated the Li family text, he doesn't have good understanding to ancient grammar, not ancient, like olden Chinese grammar of Qing dynasty, because traditionally, if you don't know, Chinese, when they write books, they don't have comma and full stop. Those are almost like something they learn from the West. Originally, their text is just one block of text. There's no comma and full stop. You kind of have to have a general knowledge on how wording and grammar work to basically deduce where the sentence ends and where is the pause, which is one of the things why studying of historical text is kind of challenging for modern people because you kind of have to guess where the stop and the commas go. And basically, the one who wrote the Li family text actually put the comma and full stop at wrong places on the Sun Lutang's text. And obviously, again, unless they have clairvoyance power, how would they know what Sun Lutang was writing in his book about Xingyi? Obviously, the easy argument is that Sun Lutang basically, plagiarized the Li text. But I believe that is very unlikely to happen because Sun Lutang, first of all, is a very established martial artist as well as a very educated scholar. He wrote many texts in his lifetime and is considered one of the most educated martial art masters of his time, right? In terms of reading, writing, essay publishing books. If he really wanted to copy the Li family's text, he would not need to copy it word for word because he could have rewrite the whole thing in his own words. And furthermore, he has a great understanding on martial arts. That is pretty much agreed upon by everyone at the time. He was one of the highest level martial artists of the Republic era. Which means if he wants to write something about martial art, he does not have to plagiarize somebody else. Okay, he has enough knowledge to write 10 books. There's very little reason at all for him to plagiarize someone else. And furthermore, Sun Lutang was someone who likes to chase mystical theories, beliefs, and myths, right? He's huge on that. He went to Wudang Mountain, he went to all kinds of places. A later part of his life, he tried to reach immortality. Did a lot of those crazy stuff. So if he actually got hold of the Li family text, it actually for him would be good to include it saying that, hey, he discovered a secret text from the ancient time and it's really great. He wouldn't need to keep a secret, right? It doesn't strengthen his position in the martial art world to have uncovered a secret piece of text. If anything, it makes his position even better. So he has no reason to plagiarize Li's text. Especially not to mention that, helping the Li to correct the grammar mistake and putting comma and full stop in the right place. The way Li wrote the text, it doesn't even make grammar sense in some of the smaller sentences. So this is another example or evidence of why the Li text is most likely fabricated because it copied the Sun Lutang's Wuji quality of Xingyi word for word. Another part of the Wuji longevity training text actually came from another piece of Sun Lutang's book. It's basically a forewording that one of Sun Lutang's students called Ai Liu Kuan, right? Ai Liu Kuan basically was a student of Sun Lutang and he wrote a foreword for his master's book. And in there he recounted an experience where Sun Lutang was teaching him. And he wrote down what he recounted as the experience, what Sun Lutang said, etc., etc., which also has touch on the topic of Wuji, and that text was also seen in the Li family text. Okay, so again, unless the Li family also can use clairvoyance power to deduce what Sun Lutang was said to one of his students in one of their meetings, they should not have this text in the family manuscript. And of course, this I character, he also somehow found the Li family text and decided to take a piece of it and pretend that Sun Lutang told him instead, which again is highly unlikely, almost impossible. Then it does not explain why the Li family text has these word for word direct plagiarized sentences and paragraphs from Sun Lutang's book. Okay, lastly, the nail in the coffin is basically at the end of the manuscript. They basically written 大明万历年, right? Basically, it's the date. 大明 is the dynasty, Ming dynasty, the great Ming dynasty. 万历 is one of the emperor's naming period. The problem to this is basically, if you are part of the Ming dynasty, right, where you supposedly written this text, you do not call your time 大明. 大明 is basically a name given from other historical period looking at the Ming dynasty. If you are a person living in the Ming dynasty, you will call it 本朝, right? Which means the current dynasty. You don't rename your current dynasty in every text you write, as if you are writing it for historians. That is not how Chinese people write things back in those days, right? You don't name your own dynasty because it's obvious that everybody knows what dynasty you belong to. That's why they say 本朝, the current dynasty. And furthermore, the person who wrote the text made a spelling error, right? So they basically, Wan Li is basically, like I say, it's an emperor's naming period, right? Whenever a new emperor comes up, he makes a new naming period until he passes away. The year will count according to his naming wording. So this supposed period is called Wan Li. So now the character Li actually have two different words, right? The one that they use in the text, it looks like this. I think my pen's running out. Right, I hope you can see, but I mean, yeah, I think this pen's running out, and I can't really buy a new one given the lockdown and all that. So the Li that they wrote is this character, which is actually the wrong character. The actual period, Wan Li, where the emperor given the words, the character he chose was this. Okay? The reason that there's confusion is because when the traditional character was simplified, both Li became the same simplified word, which looks like this. Okay? So what this means is whoever wrote that text are actually someone from the modern era where they learned Chinese through simplified Chinese. And he could not tell the difference between these two characters because it does not exist in modern day. However, he knew that this text that supposedly was written in the Ming Dynasty must be written in traditional Chinese character, not simplified. Therefore, he looked up the traditional character for this and found that character instead of this character. Okay, will show that he has no understanding of actual Chinese history. This character basically is a Li that refers to history, right? 历史, history. Use this character. This is calendar, 挂历, 月历, that character. They're not the same character at all in the Ming Dynasty or when people are still using traditional Chinese characters. But they become the same character in simplified Chinese. So I believe this is pretty much the nail in the coffin, right? Because the guy clearly had education on simplified Chinese and he looked up in the dictionary for what this character was written as in the traditional text without knowing that they're actually two different texts, and he used the wrong one for his date. So I believe if any of these things I point out individually, you might explain it away, right? Although I don't think you can really perfectly, but you can argue that maybe he was not educated enough and he wrote the wrong character. But if you take everything into consideration together, I think without a doubt or any reasonable of doubt, the Li text was definitely fabricated in more recent era. I'm not saying there was no Qianzai Temple and there was no Li Daozi who maybe was good at some kind of martial art or military training. I don't know. Maybe those are true. And most likely Chen Wangting was friends with the Li brothers, right? Li Zhong and Li Xin. And they probably were met together on their way to the military examination and they became friends. That's all possibly happened. But they claim that they are the founder of or the mother of Taichi. Does not hold, especially the fact that they actually have to fabricate a manuscript to prove that indicates they actually have no evidence that they can bring up to actually prove their case. And lastly, right, even if a massive if at that, even if they were the mother of Taichi, they don't actually have martial art anymore in the village, right? They don't train anymore, right? This was not known to their own people until they uncovered an ancestral manual, according to them. So even if they were the mother of Taichi, they don't have the martial art anymore. And any of these claims means nothing for actual Taichi practitioners, right? But however, of course, I don't believe their claim is even legit, right? Until they can bring, more evidence that isn't full of holes. But up until now, if they bring up more evidence, I'll naturally assume they're fabricated because Why would you fabricate in the first place if you have legit evidence? Or if they allow their text to be carbon dated, which they refuse to. Again, very suspicious. So ultimately, I believe that the Li family claim is completely false, right? Maybe they have ancestor that was good at martial art, but it's not the same as Taichi. And I don't believe they even know what this Wuji Yangsheng Gong is, or whether they even have a Wuji longevity training. That whole thing most likely could be made up as well. So with this, we'll end our, pretty much this is a 6-part series, episode 2 on the origin of Taichi. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. And so ultimately, my conclusion is, Chen family were the forefathers. Qi Guang's first classic is their forefather. But Yang Chan is the one who actually named the style, therefore he's supposed to be the founder of the Taichi first that we know of today. That'll be all for today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope it all made sense. If you got any questions or comments, feel free to leave them under my video on YouTube channel, and I'll definitely get back to you. If you've enjoyed the video, please subscribe to my channel and keep up to date with my latest content. And if you can, please support me on Patreon. It will be greatly appreciated, and it will enable me to make more quality videos and content on a more frequent basis. It will help me out plenty. And also, I'd like to give a shout out to my 2 new Patreon supporters, Simon Wang and Chris Peterson. Thanks for supporting me, and hope you guys enjoy the content I'm offering, both on YouTube as well as on exclusive content that I have on Patreon. Right? Got any questions? Feel free to contact me. I don't always remember to say this, but I'm also greatly appreciative to all my other Patreon supporters that have been supporting me since the beginning of since last year when I started my Patreon channel. Your help has always been appreciative, right? I don't always mention this because when I do a video, my focus is always on the content of the video, right? I'm the type of person that when I focus on one thing, I tend to forget everything else exists in the world. But even when I don't say it, that means I don't remember you guys and I don't appreciate the support you guys are giving me. Right? It has helped me plenty. So thanks all my Patreon supporters. And you guys are great. I hope you enjoy my future content. And next week we are gonna still stay on Taichi. I have been having requests from other people that want to do Dong Haichuan, Bagua, Xinyi, and other things. I will definitely get to those eventually, but I would like to stay on one style and make videos on all the things I would like to talk about before moving on to another style. Right, there's still a lot I have to talk about in terms of Taichi. Next week's episode, if nothing goes wrong, would be on the downfall of the Yang family. So basically, if you see Yang Chan as a race to fame out of nowhere, Yang Banhao and Yang Jianhao basically kept their father's legacy, reputation, and fame in the martial art world in Beijing. We're going to look at how eventually it went all downhill to a point of in modern day where Taichi is almost like a laughing stock in the martial art community, right? Especially after Xu Xiaodong fought with Wei Lei and all the stuff that happened after that. Pretty much nowadays, if you talk about Taichi, people laugh in your face. Whereas in the Qing dynasty, Taichi is one of the most respected and feared combat martial art of the period. I'm going to briefly look on how that came about and part of the Yang family history that you may or may not know. So stay tuned. In the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and thanks for watching TriEssence Martial Art channel. I'll see you next time.